Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Paranormal Misfit Podcast. I am your host, Chrissy, and I am here to talk about all things horror, macabre, paranormal, cryptid, and everything in between. So cozy up with your favorite spot with a hauntingly delicious drink and listen along. Okay, so kind of excited about this one. Um, Mainly because I like weird history and I don't know. I was rewatching some stuff. So, with that being said, what happened was I was rewatching American Horror Story, and granted, music's loud. Um, Granted, it's not everyone's favorite season, and it definitely isn't one of mine. I am a very big American Horror Story fan. Mainly like their earlier stuff, kind of one through, I don't know, up to Hotel. But I decided to rewatch Roanoke. And still a terrible fucking season. They probably should have ended after doing the whole reenactments and like the ghost story stuff. But there was a few things they did after that that I was just like, no, thank you. So, anyways, so tonight, oh yeah, lost that nail. Anyways, so tonight I decided why not cover about the lost colony of Roanoke. So here we go. All right, so Roanoke, right? Roanoke was a colony that was attempted by Sir Walter Raleigh to be founded as the first permanent English settlement in North America. Founded in 1585 and abandoned by 1590. Many conspiracies, theories, and rumors surround the infamous colony. 112 of 121 of the colonists remain unknown. So, Governor Ralph Lane landed on Roanoke Island, which is now present day Dare County, North Carolina, in 1585. With lack of supplies and piss poor relations with the local Native American tribes, this colony was doomed for failure from the start. So Lane hightailed it in about 1586 with Sir Francis Drake. After this failure, John White settled in 1587 in what was supposedly supposed to be the Chesapeake Bay. So White returned to England with Simon Fernandez in 1588 to gather more supplies. Now, whenever White decided to join, hold on. Oh yeah, White, right? So he decides that out of the 117 colonists that will be coming to this new colony, one of them should be his pregnant daughter, Eleanor. So, so in 1588, to gather more, because obviously we didn't learn our first two times, um, needing more supplies, more food, maybe even more people. White returns to England with Fernandez to basically gather more supplies for the colony. The delay in the return was due to the Anglo-Spanish War. So England was at war with Spain, and clearly Spain had the better armada, right? So, anyways, due to this, he was not able to make it back until 1590. When he did make it back to the colony, he had found that the settlement was abandoned and that there was a cryptic single word carved into a stake wall, Croatoan. He interpreted it as the colonists had left and relocated to Croatoan Island, where a tribe of Native Americans named the Croatoan Indians were located, and luckily they had built strong relations with them prior to him leaving to go get provisions. So Croatoan Island, which is also known as Hatteras Island, 50 miles out, right? So we got that. Before conducting a search for the colonists, because John White, It'd help if I learned their names. Yeah, John White. John White. Before he was able to conduct his search, a large storm came in, and the next day, White's men basically refused to assist in searching for them. So they kind of hightailed it back to England, right? So rumors swirled in Jamestown that the remaining settlers were killed by natives and some were kept as captives within the tribes, but there was no actual evidence to be found of this. So the best part of all of this, and it's not really the best part, I mean, lives were lost and everything, right? But colonization. So we're going to go through 10 horrifying facts and then a few conspiracy theories. And this should be pretty fun because I found it to be a blast whenever I was looking this up. And I know it sounds terrible, but whatever. All right, so the 10 horrifying stories, true stories from the lost Roanoke colonies. Let's see. So the first one was colonists, and this would explain why there was it was doomed for failure to begin with, right? So number 10. Colonists burned down a native village because someone stole a cup. So the Roanoke settlers weren't very good people. They viewed the natives as savages, and they treated them as savages too. From the moment the colony was established, they built bad blood with people around them. Shortly before their fort was built, a colonist discovered that one of their silver cups had been missing. They quickly became convinced that a native man had taken it, and they weren't going to let him get away with it. By English law, the penalty of theft was usually a whipping. But the English law did not apply to the natives. Instead, the Roanoke settlers burned every inch of the native man's hometown to the ground because they had lost a single fucking cup. Another truth is that the natives tried to involve the colonists in their wars. So the colony was not a success. They were almost immediately hit by famine and started to starve. The only food they could grow was corn. They had to rely on help from the natives to stay alive. A tribe called the Secotans gave them food, but they didn't do it for free. They had seen Europeans the Europeans' weapons and technology and knew that whoever managed to team up with them would have a major advantage when the next tribal war broke out. The Secotan chief Wingana, I heard this on the History Channel, and I'm not going to lie, it didn't sink very well into my brain, and I apologize if I'm butchering his name. Vied for the colonists' sympathy. An enemy tribe, he told them, had invited some of his people to a peace talk and then massacred them during the feast, and he wanted revenge. The English didn't want to get involved, so the chieftain's attitude changed. He stopped sharing food with the settlers and told them that he didn't have enough to spare. He then told the colonists that it wasn't his fault the colonists were starving to death. There was simply a reason why. Your Lord God is not God. Colonists kidnapped and ransomed natives. Now, I wouldn't put this past us, obviously. It is one of the truths. We all know that from colonization and reading everything that we have read in history. Though you have to usually really deep dive into history to find those things because whitewashing. Anyways, with their crops dying, the colony restored some desperate measures to get food from the natives. The governor, a man named Ralph Lane, remember he was the first one, was famously cruel. He would regularly kidnap natives and hold them hostage, not because they'd done anything wrong, but because they were useful bartering chips. The natives weren't too happy with his approach. One of Lane's hostages named a boy named Skikiko tried to make a break for it. And once again, I'm sorry if I butchered his name. As he ran for freedom, he was caught by Lane. Lane then locked him up, beat him horribly, and threatened to cut off his head. After the torture at Lane's hands, the boy let it slip that the tribes were planning to rise up and attack Roanoke, and that Wingana had organized them. Lane would be the first to die. The colonists murdered the Secotan chief. Lane decided to strike first. He gathered together an armed group, and raided the camp at night, slaughtering every person they could find. The Secretans were caught off guard, and the Roanoke settlers ripped through them easily. Lane spotted the chieftain and beckoned him to face him on the shore, man to man. The chieftain advised. He rushed at Lane, but was shot in the back by another man. For a moment, he laid on the ground. Settlers thought he was dead. Then, realizing all was lost, the chieftain got up and fled into the forest. He didn't get away, though. A man named Edward Nugent chased after him and emerged from the woods moments later, carrying his severed head. The Croatan chief helped the colonists slaughter his own people. In time, Lane left the colony. He sailed back to England, leaving an artist named John White in charge. Lane's reign of violence was over, but there were still many more bodies to claim. Croatoan isn't just a nonsense word. It referred to the Croatoan, the only tribe that was actually getting along with the colony. Manteo, a Croatan chief, which, going back in history for this Croatan chief, this particular Native American had been on 2 separate voyages to England, I believe with Sir Walter Raleigh. I'll have to look it up again. But he wasn't necessarily the chief. He was deemed chief by the English. So there's that. Anyways, Manteo, the Croatan chief, was the colony's most valued guide and interpreter. So he was so dedicated to the colony that he was even baptized as a Christian. When the Roanoke tribe, which the colony was named after, became hostile, White sent Manteo out to talk to them, hoping to smooth out some of the tensions that Lane had left. Manteo returned and reported that Roanoke tribe had killed 20 Englishmen over the past 20 years. White was livid. He had organized a group of 25 men and ordered Manteo to lead them to the killers so that they could get revenge. Manteo did this as he was told, but he accidentally led them to the wrong place. By mistake, he took them to a group of Croatans living peacefully away from the main tribe and led the English forces to massacre his own people. Number 5 is the first English baby was born and lost at Roanoke. Now, as you remember, I told you that Governor John White had dragged his pregnant daughter over to the first English colony. So the first English child born in America was born at Roanoke and was lost with the colony. Her name was Virginia Dare, and she was the grandchild of Governor John White. Just 9 days after her birth, though, that is when White left. The colony was still starving and in hostile land. They were in desperate need of aid, and if his granddaughter was going to survive, White would need to get help from the Empire. So funny, it sounds like Star Wars. So he brought Manteo with him. The two promised to return within 3 months, but they didn't. As I stated earlier, England was at war with Spain, and the fighting kept White and Manteo away from making the trip back. It took almost 3 years before they made it back to Roanoke, and by then it was too late. Fact 4 is that the Spanish army found the colony. The Spanish army had heard about the Roanoke colony. However, instead of a small group of 118 people, they believed it was a powerful English military base. They were hunting for it and determined to destroy it. Shortly after White left, the Spanish found it. They thought it was in Chesapeake Bay, and assuming that the Roanoke Island was too small to contain the enormous army they had imagined. On the way back from a failed search of the bay, however, a man named Vincent Gonzalez was hit by strong winds and was blown right into Roanoke colony. Gonzalez didn't enter the colony itself, but he found clear proof it was there. He reported his discovery to Spain, pushing for a total invasion of Roanoke. Nobody actually tried to find the lost colony, and this is true as well. When White returned, the colony was abandoned. White was sure, though, that the word Croatoan meant they were safe, hiding with one of the tribes that didn't want them dead. White wanted to find his family, and he convinced the captain to sail to Croatan, but was hit by a heavy storm, and their food started to run low. Instead, the ships went south to get fresh water, but once they restocked, White couldn't get anyone to go back and help him find his family. White was sent to Trinidad, and then ultimately back to England. He never saw his family again, and on that note, he had also retired in Ireland. Other people tried to look for the colonists. Sir Walter Raleigh sent out teams to find them, but every one of them turned back due to bad weather before starting a real search. Over in England, Raleigh was soon accused of treason and the searches stopped. The Spanish too tried to hunt for the colonists. They got word that they were living in Chesapeake Bay and planned a full assault, but the plane was dropped. No one ever saw these colonists again. Fact number 2. Archaeological evidence indicates that the colonists joined neighboring tribes. James White had marked the tiny star on the map of Virginia so well concealed that it was only recently found, and this was actually a really cool thing to know. So when they would create maps, it would be more time consuming to restart a map than it would to kind of paste over another piece of the map material. And that's actually what they had found, is that there was a four-pointed star almost found in an area where they would have labeled as the colony, I believe. So it marked where he believed his family had fled. It took until 2012 before anyone would search that area White had marked. The archaeologists who found the 16th century English applies, who did find the 16th century English applies, that they could have only belonged to the Roanoke colonists. There was this English pottery, flintlocks, and tools that the colonists seemed to have taken with them as they fled for safety for a friendly tribe. There's evidence that they didn't stay put, though. Other 16th century English artifacts have been found at the homes of various tribes on every side of the old settlement. It seems that the colonists had settled into native life. By 1701, a man named John Lawson visited the Croatoan. By then, they had light hair, blue eyes, and spoke fluent English. There was little doubt, he wrote, that the people he saw were descendants of this lost colony. The last one is Pocahontas' father claimed he killed the colonists. Fleeing to neighboring tribes might have not been enough to keep the colonists alive. A few years after they disappeared, John Smith landed in Chesapeake Bay. Here is where he met Chief Powhatan, best known as the father of Pocahontas, and learned the fate of the Roanoke colony. Powhatan's priest had told him that a great empire would rise from the Chesapeake Bay, and he sent his men to slaughter the tribe living there. There, among them, Powhatan said, were a group of white faces living among a native tribe. The strange sight of white faces among the tribe didn't stop Powhatan, though. He murdered every one of the Roanoke colonists that he had found. It is possible that some of these colonists escaped Powhatan's onslaught, but that no survivors were found. For the most, the end likely came shortly after they had finally learned how to live in peace with their neighbors at the hands of the warlords who hadn't. Okay. Apologies. It's just been a long day. All right, so I have found so many great theories on this. So it's going to be a little long. All right. And they range from supernatural theories to, theories that they kind of just got, text and all this stuff. So, yeah. All right. So, scrolling down. Oh, here we go. So, number 1 is the colonists were absorbed into local Indian populations or captured as slaves. The most popular theory is that the colonists left Roanoke and that they sought shelter with other Indian tribes. There were many documented sightings of Europeans and their influence in the years following the disappearance of these settlers. And the theory goes with these Europeans could have been the missing settlers or their descendants. So there's a map drawn by a Jamestown settler named Francis Nelson in 1607 that documented 4 men who came from Roanoke living among the Iroquois tribe. In the early 1600s to the middle 1700s, European colonists claimed to have met gray-eyed Indians who claimed to have been descendants of white settlers. In 1696, the French Huguenots left records meeting blonde-haired, blue-eyed Indians soon after their arrival along the Tar River. In 1709, John Lawson, in his book A New Voyage to Carolina, records that Croatoans living on Croatoan Island who claimed that they had used to live on Roanoke Island, they claimed to have had white ancestors. William Starchy also claimed to have seen 2 Indian tribes that I'm not going to try and butcher the names, living in 2-story stone houses that the English showed them how to build. The main theory is that the settlers of Roanoke moved to Croatoan Island, joined with the Native Americans there. Croatoan Island is just located south of Roanoke Island and was the home of the Croatoan Indians. The settlers had good relations with them, so we can only assume that the settlers were absorbed into the tribe. This theory has never been substantiated, but with the clues left at Roanoke, plus the good relations that were standing there between the settlers and the Indians at the time of their disappearance, this is all we have to go on. There is another theory that the colonists who joined the Croatoans and they relocated inland along the Alligator River, slightly far from Roanoke Island. The archaeological site of the settlements, including the burial grounds, have been discovered there. The coffins at the burial grounds have Christian markings on them, but there were no previous records of any settlement or gravesite in this location. There is no definitive evidence that the site belonged to the missing Roanoke settlers, though. While the prevailing theory is that the Roanoke people merged with the local Indian populations, it is just possible it wasn't the happy ending, though, considering that the people were never heard from again. It is also just as likely that they encountered hostile Native American tribes, and they could have been taken away as slaves. William Starchy, a secretary of Jamestown, Virginia, claimed in 1612 he saw Europeans, 4 men, 2 boys, and 1 girl living in the Eno tribe as slaves, and that they were forced to beat copper, but there's no evidence that these European descendants were the settlers of Roanoke. So there was a development of technology solving the mystery of what happened to Roanoke is more possible now than ever due to DNA testing. We can now test Native American peoples who claim to be descendants from the Roanoke settlers to see if the fact is true. The Lost Colony of the Roanoke DNA Project, started in 2007, was founded by Roberta Estes with her private DNA testing company to see if the missing colonists did, in fact, merge with local Native American populations using historical records, migration patterns, and oral histories. The project offers DNA tests to people who think they might be descended from the people of Roanoke using Y chromosomes. So far, DNA testing of Native Americans have not been able to identify the Roanoke descendants. Croatoan. And every time I hear this word, I hate to say it. Thank you, American Horror Story, for ruining for me. Croatoan. Okay, sorry. The word Croatoan was found carved into a fence post by the abandoned colony, and its presence at the site is one of the most confusing mysteries of Roanoke. Why was it? The word Croatoan is also connected to mysterious happenings over the century. Strange happenings such as Black Bart, a stagecoach thief. In 1888, he had scribbled this word onto his jail cell. Ambrose Bierce, who was a novelist, had, I believe, etched this into his bedpost in 1913. Carol A. Deering, a ghost ship, had this etched as well somewhere on the ship. Amelia Earhart had actually scribbled the word Croatoan in her journal prior to her disappearance, and then the death of Edgar Allan Poe. So it says that each one is more puzzling than the last. Right before he died, Edgar Allan Poe had disappeared for a short time. When he was seen again, he was delirious. In fact, in this final state of delirium before his death, Allegedly, one of the last words he said was Croatoan. Poe's official cause of death is unknown, and his medical records and death certificate are in fact lost, so we will never know what happened to him the night that he died. As I said, the word has appeared at several other famous disappearances in the 19th and 20th centuries. In 1888, a stagecoach robber, Black Bart, carved the word into the wall of his cell before he was released from prison, and he was never seen or heard from again. It was also found in Amelia Earhart's journal after she disappeared in 1937. The last bed that horror writer Ambrose Bierce slept in before he disappeared in Mexico in 1913 had the word Croatoan carved into one of the posts. In 1921, Croatoan was written on the last page of the logbook of the ship Carroll A. Deering, which crashed in Cape Hatteras near Croatoan Island. The ship was missing with its entire crew. Not the ship was missing. The ship was missing its entire crew. Okay, number 3, the colonists were murdered. 1607, we go back. This is about Chieftain Powhatan, who John Smith claimed that he had killed them. So in 1607, Captain John Smith tried to uncover what happened to the Roanoke colony. He claimed that Chief Powhatan told him he killed the people of the colony to retaliate against them for living with another tribe that refused to ally with him. Allegedly, the chief showed Smith items he took from Roanoke to support his story, including a musket barrel and a brass mortar and a pedestal. In 1609, the story reached England, and King James and the Royal Council blamed Powhatan for the missing colonist. Let's see. So, as I said earlier, there's another theory that the Spanish murdered the settlers because they were at war with each other, fighting over some land. All right, so this one is kind of, well, this one's going to have 2 separate things to it. So, number 4's conspiracy theory revolves around cannibalism. Okay. So, there are 2 theories for this one that I have found, and then one more theory that I found, which we'll go into after these 2. So, there are 2 theories about cannibalism on this site. Either the people of Roanoke were victims of cannibals, or they had to resort to it to stay alive. Other Native American tribes were hostile to outsiders, and they weren't on good terms with the settlers or the Croatoans. One of these groups could have been cannibals. There have never been bodies found at the settlement, but that doesn't mean anything. Bones could have been used for healing remedies by grinding them into powder. People of Roanoke could have been picked off gradually, or the cannibals could have kidnapped them and disposed of them that way. In fact, no bodies were found. Sounds like a time-consuming endeavor, but White was gone for 3 years. If cannibals attacked the settlers, they had more than enough time to dispose of all the bodies. As there is no definitive evidence that any Native American tribes in the area were cannibals, this is a less likely theory than that of the people of Roanoke becoming cannibals themselves. So in 1609, in the settlement of Jonestown, Virginia, the colony had to resort to cannibalism to stay alive. It is possible that the people of Roanoke had to do this as well. The settlers could have been hungry enough to see cannibalism as a viable option. During the investigations into the disappearance of the settlers, local tribes mentioned that there were internal conflicts in Roanoke before everyone disappeared. The people who could have resorted to cannibalism because they were hungry and killed themselves off. An outlandish theory, but an interesting one nonetheless. Now, let me share the cannibalistic theory that I found that is absolute, it's funny. Cannibalism's not funny. Where is it? Could it be that the colony disappeared due to a zombie plague outbreak, and due to the fact that they were located on an island, that the outbreak was actually contained? Did the colonists cannibalize themselves in this zombie plague, and that's why there are no bodies? That's another one. Just saying, a couple questions to think about here. It was brought up on, I think it was BuzzFeed's what, unknown or something. I don't know. I have to go back and look at it. I was watching it on YouTube earlier. Okay, so disease is another theory that has a much historical basis to support. Roanoke colonists have encountered a New World disease that they had no immunity to fight. The theory goes that the colonists could have got the good old-fashioned plague that presented with symptoms of delirium, paranoia, or madness. Considering the reports the Native American tribe had in the area about internal warfare in the Roanoke settlement before everyone disappeared, this seems like a very viable theory. The healthy could have wanted to get rid of those who were sick because they were afraid of getting sick themselves. This easily could have escalated into a violent situation. Once the disease hit, the healthy population could have sectioned off into smaller groups, leaving the rest of the colony who were sick to die. This certainly could have explained multiple sightings of Europeans and local Indian populations in the later years after the colony disappeared. The only problem with the theory is that what happened to the bodies of the sick. Leaning back into American Horror Story, even with this theory, was witchcraft. There are two theories involving witchcraft. The Croatoan either executed the colonists as witches, or the colonists were victims of witches who lived in the North Carolina woods. Croatoans believed in witches and witchcraft. Their definition of witches was people who used black magic to commit evil in everyday life. While there's no evidence that the Croatoans executed witches, or that the Croatoan accused the people of Roanoke of witchcraft, they were known for condemning dangerous outsiders. They could have easily blamed the people of Roanoke for spreading disease to which the Croatoan had no immunity to. The Croatoans and other Native American tribes tell of legends of witches who live in the North Carolina woods who would use black magic to hurt other people. There is a story that people of Roanoke became victims of these witches when they had left the island, and that is why they were never heard from again. So, supernatural and religious explanations. I'm going to do a brief look over on this before I give you a couple, and they're wild. Oh, okay. All right. So there are many supernatural and religious explanations incorporated in Native American belief systems. There is no scientific basis for these theories, but they are still taken very seriously by Native American populations as explanations onto what happened to the missing settlers of Roanoke. They mainly revolve around Native American spirits that help explain away not only the behavior of the colonists before they disappeared, but why the colonists disappeared without a trace. Native Americans believe in a wild spirit in the form of a beast called the Wendigo. That made me shudder. Okay, when people resort to eating human flesh, as in cases of cannibalism, their bodies are taken over by a Wendigo. If the people of Roanoke resorted to cannibalism, then according to this belief, they are still alive, roaming the woods of North Carolina in the form of Wendigos. The Croatoan belief system includes a spirit on the island that had the power to absorb humans into the landscape. If the spirit is offended or angry, it would turn people into trees, animals, stones, or any other part of that land. If the colonists were exploiting resources or abusing the land, it could have angered the spirit. This means that the people of Roanoke didn't disappear at all. Instead, they were just simply absorbed into the land. Another thing the Croatoans believed in was the reptilian devil of the woods, an evil spirit that could attach itself to people. This spirit made people violent, greedy, and paranoid. The Croatoan believed that the reptilian spirit had possessed the settlers once they started to turn on each other after that, after White had left for England to retrieve more supplies. Here is another one. This is fun too. Well, not fun. Another supernatural occurrence that could have happened was there could have been a mass abduction of aliens, and that is why there is no mass grave of bodies. Could they? It's plausible. We're talking about the 1600s, right? And aliens have been documented since the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Sumerians. the Egyptians. So I mean, it's not a tall tale, but it's a tale. But it does make sense because, mass abduction of the settlers. You can't find any bodies. You don't see any traces of where they went. So who knows? Could be. Right. The final one is called the Dare Stones. So from 1937 to 1940, a series of stones were discovered that supposedly tell the story of what happened to this Roanoke colonist. They are called the Dare Stones because they are mostly apparently written by his daughter, John White's daughter, Eleanor Dare. Most historians consider the Dare Stones to be a hoax, although many historians believe that the first and only stone is authentic. In 1937, a tourist found an inscribed stone and brought it to Emory University to examine its authenticity. Dr. Haywood Pierce, a professor of American history, didn't claim that the stone was authentic, but didn't contradict it. But it didn't contradict what was known at the time. The inscription was consistent with the paraphrasing of the time, and colonists would have had tools to carve such a message. The inscriptions on the stone stated that Eleanor's husband and daughter were dead and asked whoever found the stones to tell her father. The inscription read, Aeneas Dare and Virginia went hence unto heaven in 1591. Any Englishman sue, John White Governor via. The other side of the stone reportedly only had 7 of the Roanoke colonists were left alive, and that the Native Americans murdered the rest, and it was signed with EWD, which is Eleanor White Dare. So in 1940-47, more stones were found, dating until 1599. The stone that dated 1592 claims that the survivors of Roanoke are safe and living with the tribe in the Nocatchee Valley in Georgia. One dated from 1598 claims that Eleanor Dare had married a local chief. Another stone claims that she had given birth to the chief's daughter, and the tribe was angry about it, and that Eleanor requested that her father bring the girl back to England with him. The stone dated from 1599 stated that Eleanor Dare had died and that she had a daughter named Agnes that would survive her. After their discovery, though, the stones were examined by the Smithsonian Institute and a historian from Harvard University who declared that the stones had some degree of authenticity, but in 1941, the stones were exposed as forgeries. In 2015, a History Channel documentary detailed the study of the stones by archaeologists who had found that the first stone was in fact authentic, but the others were hoaxes, concluding that they were created by a drill. So, a couple of other theories. There is a book that deals with the theory of them being absorbed into another tribe, and that there was some supernatural part to it. So it's called The White Doe, which is the fate of Virginia Dare. And some people do claim that they do see pale deer roaming the woods of this area of where she was supposedly relocated. There is a theory that the colonists were intentionally stranded as a means to kind of slyly embarrass and kind of drag down the name of Sir Walter Raleigh. There's also the theory that obviously he left and said he'd be back in 3 months, and instead it took him 3 years, and that the colonists got bored and left. They were tired. They attempted to sail and obviously did not end well. So, yeah, not really so much as like a haunting story, but it's an intriguing story, right? The lost colony of Roanoke. I think it's always one of those that everyone kind of thinks about. I know I think about it. I mean, American Horror Story, it piqued my interest for it, but it's American Horror Story. Come on. I can see the idea of witchcraft. I can see the idea of supernatural. So you guys let me know what you think, out of all of the things you've read, you've heard, you've seen. What do you guys think happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? And with that, that concludes this episode. I hope you enjoyed everything that was shared. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. You can always check out these episodes on Spotify, Applecast, and at the beginning of next year, YouTube. You can connect with me on Instagram at Paranormal Misfit Podcast, or you can also shoot me an email at the paranormalmisfitpod@gmail.com. If you really enjoyed the episodes or would like to support this podcast, please feel free to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. The link is down below. And with that, I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your weekend and into the next week. And I will see you at the next episode. Have a good night, guys.